My name is Alan Ruszkowski. That's how we pronounce it in California. In Poland, it would be more like Ruszkowski. And so I'm very elated to be here at the guest of Promedical and Cassandra Oti, who is establishing and bringing this technology to Australia. We've had some tremendous success in the United States, particularly Southern California, New York City, and Northern California and Florida, and we're getting more and more centers every month. We have performed more than 280,000 20-minute CVAC sessions with zero significant adverse events. The only thing that comes close to that kind of safety record is exercise itself. And we're getting just remarkable results with people with dementia and Alzheimer's disease and traumatic brain injury. So as we progress with this technology, we will be conducting more and more research as if it was a medical device, but because it's safe, so proven to be so safe, the US FDA has chosen not to regulate it. Instead, they have chosen to allow our company, and we are licensing that with Promedical, to market this technology as a form of exercise, even though it is reversing disease. I was looking for new technology to get involved in, and I found a respiratory therapist in a bicycle shop giving these manual CVAC sessions in a pressure vessel to world champion cyclists and other athletes. I took a session. I didn't feel any different afterwards, but the next morning I had a rather remarkable experience. I was 50 years old at that time, and I began to notice in my 40s that my brain wasn't working as good as it used to. It's like no matter how much coffee I drink, I didn't feel like I was totally awake. And I would be working on a problem, and I'd know there's a solution, and I'd almost see the solution, and it would disappear out of my mind. I began to notice that my knuckles and my hands were getting large and painful from banging on the computer. My knees were hurting, my ankles were hurting. And so this next morning, after taking the first CVAC session, it's like someone cleaned the windshield on my brain. It was interesting. I thought, well, this is an interesting placebo effect. I went to the gym, and the weights were light. And that was 16 years ago. And since then, we've put about $20 million in this company. We've gotten it to the stage where we are now. We have about nearly 30 commercial centers right now, and we're very happy to have our first one here in Australia. I believe the culture here in Australia will be very conducive to this technology. This story really should go back to give credit to Larry Ellison, who is the founder of Oracle. When he became one of the richest men in the world several decades ago, he invested a tremendous amount of money into understanding what is the aging process. And about 16 years ago, about the same time I got involved with CVAC, is the scientists that he was funding came to a consensus that the aging process and all these age-related diseases are caused by the same thing. They're caused by the accumulation of these molecules, these class of molecules called advanced glycation end products. There are now hundreds and thousands of research papers published on advanced glycation end products. And the founders of Google have created a company called Calico that they, along with a billionaire in Singapore, are committed billions of dollars to continuing this research. And recently, Larry Ellison has now started refunding that research. But they're all looking for a drug. So what I did is I went and spoke with a lot of the researchers that were involved with that research that he had funded, and they made some rather striking statements to me. They said, because I went to them saying, well, I'd like to see if the CVAC process has an effect on these metabolic waste products, and they'd say, forget about it. They spent decades researching this. You can't stop them from being produced, and once they're inside the cells and in the body, you can't get rid of them. And I said, well, what about exercise? And the researchers said, well, we don't know anything about exercise. We're looking for a drug. And I had found one paper on middle-aged women that had not been getting much exercise. They measured these waste products, advanced glycation end products in the cells, and they then put them on an exercise program. These waste products were reduced. And that really got us thinking about how exercise can slow down the aging process, and how exercise can now proven that it can prevent slow down the process of almost all age-related diseases. Certainly we know this for heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's disease. Dementia is now linked to a lack of exercise, or exercise can slow down that aging process. Something that's kind of surprising is arthritis can be linked to a lack of exercise, which is counterintuitive. Many people thought that exercise would actually accelerate arthritis because you wear out your joints. And just the opposite might be true. If you don't use your joints enough, these waste products accumulate in the joints and resulting in arthritis. It was the U.S. military that funded some of our first research in athletes, showing that this technique is more effective than erythropoietin or EPO doping. That's the drug that Lance Armstrong is admitted to taking. In doping, EPO doping, they get about a 2% increase in VO2 max. With CVAC, we're seeing routinely a greater than a 5% increase in VO2 max. Athletes rave about this technology for recovery. We've had maybe somewhere between 5 and 8 Wall Street Journal articles in athletes showing that this technology is beneficial for athletic recovery. When athletes get involved with high-intensity exercise, they are producing energy at a higher rate, and that energy production produces metabolic waste products. So while the Google founders and other people are pursuing this research looking for a drug to try and figure out what to do about these waste products, our technique is a lot simpler. We put people in a vacuum chamber, and which pulls these waste products out of the cells and out from between the cells into the lymphatic capillaries. We then cycle the pressure 200 to 500 times in 20 minutes, and that stimulates the lymphatic system to flush these waste products out of the body. That's how exercise, we believe, extends life and extends the quality of life before the development of age-related diseases. The studies are now coming up that these waste products that need to be removed from the body for active recovery for athletes get stuck in the membranes of the cells, and that increases the leakage rate, allowing blood to leak into the brain. This test, called bioimpedance phase angle, it essentially runs a very small electric current through your body. Most of that goes through the arteries, and the angle between the voltage and current is called the phase angle. And in the human body, this electric current leads the voltage by 6 to 10 degrees, which means it's measuring capacitance. And the cell membranes are two layers of molecules separated by a very unique structure. It's what holds our cells together, is the strength of these cell membranes. There's evidence now that these metabolic waste products accumulate in the cells. So that would contaminate the capacitance. So over the last decade, and the exercise, the research is now showing just in the last year that this phase angle, they've measured people being admitted to the hospital, they've measured the phase angle. People coming into the hospital with a phase angle of 3 degrees or less are likely to die within the next 2 or 3 days. A phase angle of 6 degrees to 3 degrees is known to be now not very good. Okay. So we had one of our prospective customers interested, as a neurologist interested in our device. And he had his phase angle measured, and it was 5.5 degrees. And so he asked these people, how do I get it better? And of all the machines, they pointed to our machine. So he used our machine for a few weeks. He got his phase angle up to 6.5, and he sent us $129,000 US to buy a machine. He is a physician who handles chronic pain. He receives the people with chronic pain that the medical therapies no longer work for, where there's no medicine that works for these people. So he puts his patients in the CVAC system, and they report phenomenal improvements in pain. The first study that was published by the University of California, San Diego, was in chronic pain, and they showed a statistically significant improvement in chronic pain using the CVAC process for 40 minutes for only 5 days. And there was a reduction in pain, there was weight loss, and most intriguing, there was an improvement in mental scores. So how do we explain how this is happening? Well, we think what happens is these waste products accumulate in the cell membranes. They not only allow blood to leak into the brain, we think what's happening is if the cell membranes become weak because of these waste products, they are allowing ATP, which is the molecule that produces energy for all of our cells to use, adenosine triphosphate, ATP produced by the mitochondria. We know there are ATP receptors on the outside surface of the neurons. So when you cut yourself or your bladder gets stretched because it's full of liquid, the ATP leaks out of the cells, or if you get burned, the ATP leaks out of the cells. That way you know you got burned. And if you have poor health because you've been busy and haven't been able to get enough exercise, the ATP may be leaking out of your cells, contacting the outside surface of the nerve cells, signaling chronic pain. So we have just remarkable statements from many of our users, including people with fibromyalgia, people, we have a large following of MMA fighters that use our technology. Really quite interesting. I was there when one of the first world champion MMA fighters first came in to use the CVAC system, and he looked at the machine like, wow, and this is an MMA, but it was a day after his fight. He was like in a lot of pain. The trainer said, get in there. So he gets in, and he's in there for about 3 minutes, and he goes around and he goes, what is this? MMA fighters, the day after a fight, they're in a lot of pain, and his pain goes away. So one of our customers in Newport Beach, Ascent in Newport Beach, has a large following of MMA fighters as a result of this. Tito Ortiz, Rampage Jackson were some of the first world champion MMA fighters to use this. Now a lot of MMA fighters use it. And of the male MMA fighters that use this technique 6 weeks before a fight, none of them have been knocked out, which gives us pretty encouraging evidence that this may be a way to not only treat traumatic brain injury, but prevent concussions in sports. And if we're able to achieve that, this will have a huge impact for certainly American football, but also what we call soccer, that you call football here. That also has a high degree of concussions and brain injury. And everyone is at risk of brain damage from traumatic brain injury. You can be driving in your car today, be in a car accident, and then be disabled for the rest of your life with a traumatic brain injury. I know the statistics in the United States, there are 5 million people that are disabled and debilitated because of traumatic brain injury. You can slip and fall, you can get hit on the head. One of the more interesting things, and this is the data from Dr. Lyons in Santa Ana. He had a patient who was having chronic headaches come into his clinic because he was having chronic headaches every day. He wasn't able to work, he was having migraine headaches. And he was 35 years old. He had had a 100-pound marble stone hit him on the head at work. And he would not use any other technique. He would only use the CVAC system. And after a few weeks, his headaches had been reduced from 1 a day to 1 a month. He was able to work again, so he was no longer completely disabled from his disease or his traumatic brain injury. One of the more interesting things is Dr. Lyons uses a technique called quantified EEG, electroencephalography. And this has been a very active level of research. These are electrodes that they put around the brain, and they measure the brain waves coming out of the body. And they can now isolate where in the brain the brain waves are coming, and they can measure the frequency content of the brain, but also the signal intensity, the strength of the brain waves. As people get older, the energy or the strength of the waves gets smaller. So they've been able to correlate that with aging. And this 35-year-old individual, using the strength of his brain waves, his brain biologically was 45 years old. After using CVAC a few weeks, his brain age converted to being 25 years old. And I'm 65 years old, and it feels like my brain restored to how well it works when I was in my 20s and 30s, starting General Electric's MRI system. I've been using this technique now for 16 years, and being 65 years old, people tell me I don't look 65 years old. My next door neighbor that I met 20 years ago tells me I look younger than I did when she met me. So this has some real potential because the skin is the largest organ of your body. And based on the changes in my blood pressure, the change in my brain performance, I once had a cataract before I started using this technology. That's now gone without surgery, without any intervention. The intraocular pressure in my eyes was getting to the point that I was getting close to having glaucoma. My father had glaucoma in his started in his late 50s. When he was 50 years old, he became hypertensive. I was borderline hypertensive when I was 50. I know what the side effects of those drugs are, so I don't want to have to take those drugs unless it becomes absolutely necessary. I'm 65, my blood pressure is normal without taking any medications. My intraocular pressure is normal. So for me and the people involved with our company, that's one of the reasons why we are so passionate. Heather Henniker, who is the founder and operator and principal at Ascent in Newport Beach, she became involved in this technology. She was perhaps just 30 years old. Her arthritis was so severe she couldn't pick up her 3-year-old daughter. And she had become that way because she was a mortgage broker. She spent most of her time typing on the computer all day as a mortgage. She was one of the most successful mortgage brokers. And after using CVAC a few months, her arthritis goes away. And there's a good write-up about her experience and our experience in this technology out in the Men's Journal magazine. And so she has essentially dedicated her life, and she has to adopting this technology, making it available to other people. So in the United States, we know, in say physical therapy, we have several physical therapists who utilize this technology after hip or knee surgery or shoulder surgery. Exercise is beneficial for recovery from surgery, but quite often people are in too much pain to be able to exercise. What the physical therapists do is the orthopedic surgeon refers the patients to the physical therapist for a physical therapy session. They will do manual manipulation on the person to improve range of motion. And then usually after physical therapy, people are in a lot of pain. They then put a person in the CVAC system and the pain goes away. And in the United States, we have this horrible opioid epidemic that got started because the doctors had been told that the new generation of opioids were not addictive, but people found out how to make them addictive. And so there have been nearly 400,000 people now that have died of opioids. There was a Paper magazine article that was entitled "How Sports Tech Dethroned Opioids," and were featured in that article. So that's one potential mechanism for adoption of this technology, is in physical therapy. We have several locations in the United States that are using this for recovery. One of our most successful customers in New York City, their name of their facility is Recover. They're getting great results with athletic recovery. There was recently, about a month ago, there was a 2-page article in the Wall Street Journal about a woman who had made 7 attempts to get an under 4-hour marathon, and she failed at all those attempts. She used the CVAC process and she was able to achieve her goal of getting a less than a 4-hour marathon. There is a very profound study that was, I believe, done in Sweden, where they have socialized medicine. So the government has medical records on everyone, and they were keeping track of what the results of runners were. And this was shocking, especially to the cardiology community, because a lot of cardiologists are runners, endurance runners, because they deal with the agony of what happens when people don't get enough exercise. They have heart attacks and they have chest pain. So it's highly motivating for cardiologists to stay in shape and become runners. Well, in this study in Sweden, the runners that ran 55 miles a week, which is like 120 kilometers, they had the same level of heart disease as people who got no exercise. And we think that's because when people compete and they run, if they don't get adequate exercise, these waste products get stuck in the cells. This can now be measured with phase angle to make sure that people are getting adequate exercise with phase angle. And I was fortunate the last time I went to visit Heather Hineker at Ascent, they measured my phase angle, and it was 8.3 degrees, my torso phase angle, which is excellent for someone my age. So this should be a way that we all adopt, the whole population should adopt this. The The work done by Recover in New York City is more profound than just athletic performance. New York City is a city with people under a tremendous amount of stress. One of the definitions of stress is being responsible for things you have little control over. And we're finding that through Recover, we're getting tremendous improvements in stress. I know many people tell me, including myself, when they get into the CVAC chamber, they immediately go into a meditative state. We've had a lot of athletes and trainers of athletes tell us when they get in the CVAC pod, they immediately go into the zone, and the zone may be a form of meditation that allows people to perform better. One of the real challenges with any kind of prevention technique is how do you get people to do it? Okay? How do you get people to go to get exercise? And that's where a lot of technologies that can help prevent people disease, like exercise fall down. People don't have time. And this is the CVAC is a technology, the way we've developed it, is people can work while they're inside the pod. We can install these things in places where people work, and they can schedule it like a conference room. When I first discovered the respiratory therapist Carl Linton utilizing this technology manually, we realized that it would take about 12 years to teach someone how to operate this device. So part of my skill set is we were able to automate the process with robots and computers and things like that, so we can now train someone to operate it in 12 hours instead of 12 years. So it becomes very feasible now to perpetuate this technology around the world. The device itself is certainly the most expensive piece of fitness equipment. It is much less expensive than most medical devices of this complexity. However, the product life is more than 20 years. So if you amortize the cost of it over 20 years and then understand that one of these machines can serve 60 people in like an employee wellness program. And at that cost, it's $10 per person per month, which is competitive with the cost of diabetes drugs in India. So we believe we have achieved our goals of developing the technology. Now it's a matter of getting awareness and people to understand what this can do for them. And the best way to understand that is to use it.